some sort of order. All right, no
No
problem.
problem.
Yeah. Okay, welcome everybody to another session of Talking Books with Kat. And today we are going to be talking everything fantasy books. We have our lovely authors Anoshi and Tina. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, Anoshi. Is that how it's
Yes,
pronounced? Okay, thank you very much.
100%.
Thank you. Okay, can you please kindly introduce yourselves to the viewers?
Okay. So my name is Anoshi Saretzki. By day, I'm a marketer and I have a psychology background. So I did change my career at some point. But I'm also an author, a young adult fantasy author. And I have two books, which the first one is called Juluan, and the second one is called Lumina, which came out this year. So just in summary, that's me.
Lovely, lovely. You can go ahead, Tina.
Hi guys, my name is Tina. I go by Tina King. I am a full-time writer and on my way to publishing my first hard copy. I've only been digital so far, and yeah,
Congratulations. It's quite a process and
it
it takes
is.
a lot of mental resilience to get a hard copy out.
Yes.
So well done.
Thank you.
Lovely. So I've always wanted to know more about fantasy writers because I feel like you guys have it hard compared to any other genre in this industry. I feel like fantasy is the most challenging. So, what first drew you into writing fantasy?
Okay, so on my side, I would say I do. Growing up, my dad was a big Stephen King fan. Not that I read any of his Stephen King books. I don't think it was age appropriate, but he also loved comic books, and I think that's sort of where it started. That and fairy tales, and then of course getting into Treasure Island and that kind of books. You know, as a kid, um, for me there was always the element of otherworldly environments, world building, escaping the escape of real life through fantasy and imagination. Now, I am somebody who was a child that daydreamed a lot, so my mind was always going somewhere else anyway. And I think the combination of that, plus I have really, really vivid, interesting dreams that actually do feature in my book. So I kind of feel it's a
Yeah,
calling fantasy
yeah.
because it comes to me easily. I think that's how I see it. I do know it's a very difficult genre in South Africa, but if it's a calling, you're going to do it whether you have a following or not.
True, true, very
That's
true.
true. And she's so right when she says you have vivid dreams, and some of them like bleed into the stories that we are writing. I fell into fantasy writing by chance, actually. I was always a romance writer. I loved reading romance. So when I got into the fantasy world, I wanted something a little bit different from what I was used to because I was getting a writer's block. I think I was on my second story. And I was like, I want something just different. I want a shocking element, really. And I
Mhm.
then incorporated this otherworldly situation in the story, and it was just from there. I I took it from there.
Lovely. So, do you start with writing characters, the plot, or world buildings when crafting a new story, or do you just pick up everything as you go?
Yeah. In my case, it's very much the world building. And the reason for that was my first book, Judo One, was never intended to be published. It was a story I wrote for my daughter. And it's because my dad's family live out in Winterton for 100 years. There's nobody there now, but for 100 years in the Drakensberg area. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Winterton. It's in the foothills of the Drakensberg. So the location was already there, and the fact that it's called Drakensberg and Dragon Mountain kind of gave me instantly. I mean, I had a lot of time to think about just the idea of dragons in those mountains. So the world building definitely did come to me. I did a lot of research on the area then, thereafter, once I knew I was interested in it. So I think the world building came, but also the the plot structure came through a dream. So the main character Xana, the name came in a dream. The whole plot of a witch and the main female character and the dynamic between them, the whole dream sequence that she has her entire life bugging her is a real dream I had. So that just made its way into the book. Then we have context of the Drakensberg, and then my mind just went from there.
Oh,
Lovely.
lovely. Well, with me, I it depends. The first one, I just went with the plot as is. I just took off. I didn't plan on any characters being
Mm-hmm.
involved in any sort of fantasy or realism. I just wrote it as is. Then I started to structure it on my, I think, fourth or fifth book, but it started with the royals. I knew from the beginning that I wanted to make this a fantasy story. I knew from the get before I even started writing the first chapter. And
Mm.
I think because of the royals, I then started to structure my stories from the beginning to learn whether am I writing fantasy or actual fiction. So it depends really.
Lovely. So how do you balance magic systems with with rules so the story doesn't feel too easy?
Um, my magic system is based on a connection with with their god, and you have to tap into it, and you can't. It doesn't just come to you. So
Mm.
it's almost like a trance or channeling, and the only way you can do it is through practicing it and connecting with it until it comes to you more easily, and then you have to do the connecting, and then you have to still go through all the work of trying to learn how to use and control the powers that you have. So that that you can't just do whatever you like. You have to
Yeah.
follow a process of how you activate it and how you use it and how you use it responsibly. And that's what Lumina is about, because it's a follow on from Juluwan, where Lumina is more about, so the main character has all her powers, but now she's just using it like crazy. She's just like firing it any way she likes. And the whole idea is self control.
Yeah.
And you need to use your powers responsibly. So yeah, the magic system is that there's a way of activating it, and then you've got to be in control of it. You shouldn't let it control you.
Lovely.
Absolutely, absolutely agree with that. You need to have a bit of control. I also do write some down. If, for example, there is a lot of characters who have their magic. So I need to have a structure of what magic each person has and what it can extend to. Because sometimes when you are writing the story and you don't want to lock in your, because it's fantasy, you don't want to lock in your character in one box. You need to have a way of growing them. So I like
Mhm.
to structure it in a bit of a actual write down instead of on computer. I write it down in a note file somewhere, and each character has their own development scenery of what their magic is, why it fits into the story, and how it fits into the story.
Sounds like a lot. Us
Yes, I know,
romance writers, we just cruise through.
Yeah,
We
there's a
just
lot of research to be done. You can't just create any kind of magic system,
Hmm.
because there's lots of plot holes if you don't check
right?
properly. So,
Yeah.
yep, I agree. It is tough.
So, what is the hardest part about writing a fantasy novel or a fantasy book?
The writing part, look, the way I write is, I leave it, it's a lot like trusting in the universe for the next idea to come to you, or the combining of two different uh, uh, pieces of information that seem unrelated, and how do you bring it all together? Because when I started, I thought these were two separate ideas, for example, on Julawan, and in the end, it ended up, coming together in the most epic way. So I think it's having the patience to know stop writing. You are just going to write nonsense because you're making things up. Wait for the, like, you kind of put all the thoughts or questions into your head, and you have to wait for that answer to kind of come to you. And in that sense, it does feel more like a spiritual journey than just a writing journey. But the waiting is probably the hardest part of the writing, because you wonder, am I going to finish this book? Is it going to make sense? Is anyone going to, like, so yeah, I think that for me is tough.
My hardest part, I fear, is am I taking too long of a route to reach to a point? Sometimes I like to explore in the fantasy. Like, for example, it's a fantasy story, but then it draws into different genres or into the past or into. I always wonder, am I just taking away from the actual story? Am I dragging it too much? Am I don't know, boring the reader or something along the lines? But I always have to restructure it back and make sure that I'm still keeping into the storyline, the plans that I have for the story. Usually, I don't really have an end in mind, like an exact this is when I know it'll end type of situation, but I do have an idea of at least this and that need to happen. Then I'll know, oh, okay, we're on the right track.
So, like, do you ever get anxious of how people are going to view your work? For example, let's say you have created this world with these people with superpowers. How do you feel about people now getting to read your work?
I do think, like you said when you started, it was the first thing you said. Fantasy is tough, and South Africans writing fantasy in South Africa, which is what I'm doing. It's I know already it's not going to be everyone's cup of tea. So I know that immediately. I wanted to make my book deliberately South African. So the magical people are based on the San people of South Africa. The magic systems, so everything is linked back. I mean, it's based in the Drakensberg. Every aspect of what I wrote comes from South Africa, and some part of it, and I've converted that South Africanism into magic. Now, half of the people would be people who love dark fantasy, for example, or romantasy, who would be like, nope, this is not my cup of tea. And I totally get it. The people who really enjoyed it, because I do genre blend from fantasy into sci-fi. Yeah, I find it's the people who love the fact that I'm talking about real life South African places and just making it magical, bringing the magic of the place to life, and talking about places they grew up in or visited as kids, and love the genre bending from fantasy into sci-fi. Those people then really enjoy it. So I do have a specific audience, and it's not going to be for everyone. So I think I had to make peace with the fact that what I'm doing is definitely not been done before. And whenever you start off with something that nobody's done before, I'm not following a method. I'm not following a template. I'm not following um, it's like you have a plot structure that's cast in stone, and how you should write, and the themes you write to, and I'm writing a basic story, following a traditional writing method, but the content of my story is new, will be new to South Africans. So
Yeah.
I have to make peace with the fact that it isn't for everyone, and I get excited when people do see things in it that I wrote deliberately, and they do spot all of the little Easter eggs I've put in there. Then I know that they're my reader.
Lovely.
And it's really difficult in the South African market to launch fantasy. I feel as though a lot of readers in South Africa are not, um, they know what they like and they want to stick to what they like. And to convert them from whatever it is that they like, there has to be specific trinkets that pull them into the fantasy genre. For
Mm.
example, I only fell into fantasy, I think, three or so stories in from writing. The second book that I was writing, the one where I dabbled in fantasy a little bit, where I discovered that I actually like fantasy. that was not intended to be a fantasy book. It was a romance book. So from grabbing that audience and adapting them into fantasy, that way I was able to convert. And from then onwards, it just blew from taking my audience into a journey with me. Um, I saw somewhere about someone not wanting to, not understanding actually the difference of genre, and they were saying,
Mm,
"Oh, the story has vampires and wolves," and I'm like, it's called a genre though. Like it's not
mm,
supposed to be normal. It's not supposed to, I'm going to walk outside and come across a wolf, for example. It's fantasy to escape the real life situations that we are in. So
mm.
it is difficult. It is a difficult market, but if you have your audience, trust and believe they will stick like this. They'll stick like this.
Yeah. I guess you just have to find your people, hey?
Yeah.
You, I did try it once and they were so confused. Everybody was like, I don't understand it, I don't get it. But there were a few that actually understood it. But having to convert your readers to that, as you say, is really a difficult process.
Tough. Hmm.
So how do you keep your characters grounded and relatable?
I decide what it is about them, that what ticks do they have, if that makes sense. So Xana, for instance, has spent her entire life in having these nightmares and anxiety, and of course her personality will be, everything triggers her. Whereas in my new book Lumina, I have a character Ayla, and her mother's a narcissist, so that's a trope, right? And so it depends on what I need to put them through in the story for it to all converge at the end and make sense. And because each character kind of carries some elements of a subplot. And because I mean, even it's, so I've got the main female character, but I got her best friend with her in like Jilawan, and he is funny, and but he's your ride or die. So you decide what are you building into these characters. So one is constantly anxious, and the other one is rearing to go and going straight into danger, the total opposite of each other. So I think it's about just, yeah, when you create them, what are you grounding them in? What is their role, in the book? And I guess that's my take on it.
And I
Understandable.
also, to add on to, it's just sometimes I kind of like sink into the character. I become the character themselves, and it feels as if, eh, in a way, I take over their personality. So I would understand when I go into a character of, for example, my previous book, Nkosintle. Nkosintle, I know that he's reserved. I know that he is very not, he's not quiet, but he is very withdrawn from everyone else, but he is very expressive to the woman that he loves. I know how he is with his friends. I know how he is at home. Then there is his reincarnate, his grandfather, Gitmis. He is also like him, but very different from him. So it's, you have to tap into the being of the character themselves, because there are
Hmm.
certain traits that this one would do and this one wouldn't, even though they are the same person, just born in different lifetimes.
Hmm. Sounds magical. What real world cultures or myths inspire your settings?
So, I mean, I basically have all of them. My book is set in the Drakensberg. I tap into the Tokolosh a little bit. I tap into the Sand people. When you look at their drawings on the sand rock art, they have something called a therianthrope, which is half human, half animal. And I tapped into that so the baddies are a combination of those two. The whole magical race of the Juluwasia based on the entire San people themselves. And I had read a book that you know, published in 1973, but this gentleman had spoken so warmly and so in such awe of the San people that I thought, no, I've got to base my people on these because they're the oldest bloodlines in the world
Mm,
and they live right here in South Africa or Southern Africa. And it's a nod to them because, it's just, I feel like they're our people. They're here, they are magical, and just the things he was saying about, they hear outside of normal human bounds and they see outside of normal human bounds, and the way they do their healing, they go into a trance and they lay hands, and for me that's magic in itself, and I didn't have to do a lot of work to embellish like the San people to get them to be the Juluwasi people, just because their real life existence is magical to me. So I think there were, and of course the location of the Drakensberg.
mhm,
South Africa doesn't just end at the Cape Point either. It goes into the Southern Ocean. South Africa does own islands in the Southern Ocean, etc. So and we do have an Antarctic base, a research base in Antarctica. So I went up and down wherever there's magic to talk about. I'm not sure if you guys know of Inzalo Yelanga. It's in Mpumalanga and it's quite a spiritual site. And so I just basically looked in deeply into all of South Africa's magic lore, mythology, and grounded my stories in them.
Oh,
lovely.
that's so lovely. I base mine on a lot of South African spirituality. With When You're Bound to Love, it was based on a religion, but not necessarily pinpoint which religion. It was just spirituality and being in tune with a higher being. I didn't want to structure it in to close off everyone else's beliefs. I didn't want to say this specific belief is what this queen was. I just made it a spirituality that could accommodate anyone who was
Mhm,
to read the book. And then with the following books, The Royals, I based it not necessarily on anything other than just African royalty. I needed the aspect of African specific royalty, as fantastic as it was, fantastic as in fantasy as it could be, and adding the powers, the magic, and such, but in a way that feels this is something that could be happening right down the street in my backyard or in a forest somewhere around us. And I think also adding with language. Language is very, for me, important because it then grounds where are we? Kahle kahle. Where are we in terms of um, I don't know if dialect is the proper word to use, but your tongue and what it says and when it's said, where it's said is very important, and I think that's more of what I base my fantasy on.
mm, lovely. I want to be a fantasy writer also. You guys must teach me.
You must. You definitely
You guys
must.
must teach me. Okay, welcome to everybody who just joined. We are having a question and answer session with our lovely fantasy writers, Anoshi and Tina. So, yeah, prepare your questions to ask about fantasy books and everything fantasy. I'm going to open questions at 9 o'clock. But for now, you can sit back and chill and tap the screen, please. So, what themes do you often find yourself turning to when writing?
I've only written two books, and the main overarching theme on both, because they're related, it's part of a series, is good versus evil. That's the overarching theme. But Julia One specifically's theme is the power of self belief. And it doesn't matter where you are from in life, as long as you keep pushing hard, you can live your dreams, you can get to where you were. And a big part of that was, while I was writing, and a part of my work led me to the understanding that in an area called Dundee in KwaZulu Natal, kids were having to cross the river to get to school. Now, my thing was, how many of those kids how do we push South African kids forward if they have to cross a river in winter, for example, to get across. So it's about just saying, no matter what your circumstances, the power of self-belief is so strong that it will help you overcome whatever. Make a plan, do whatever you need to, get your education, finish grade 12, go to university, whatever it is. So it was written for quite a young audience, the first one.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think that's the main theme on that one. On Lumina, it really was about control, self-control, the power, because having superpowers is one thing, but being able to control your attitude, your ability to use your powers at the right time, reading the room, it's this maturity. So there was where in Julawan they were like really kids, they're just naive and young and whatever. By the time they get to Lumina, they've had quite a lot of experiences. They've almost faced death. They faced the enemy, so it's helped them mature and grow quite a lot. But also like there are a lot of subplots and tropes. Like I said, the narcissistic mother or the enemies to friends tropes and that kind of thing. And that just helps building the story, but also building the world even more. Because in book 3, all of that is going to culminate into the ending, the final part of this. So there's a reason for each of the themes that I then do use.
Okay.
My favorite theme is connection. I love building an unlikely connection and making, or rather showing that love can come in different forms and types and shape and anything really. A lot of my fantasy books especially have blended families, unlikely families, friendships that are started in encounters where one maybe does not like the other or just doesn't understand the other. And yeah, that's the theme that I usually sort of lean towards most of the time when I'm writing.
Lovely. So, do you prefer creating original worlds or alternate version of our own world?
Yeah, I think in my case, it's set in South Africa, so it's it's a subgenre of just different kinds of fantasy. So although it is fantasy bending into sci-fi, um, I am not creating South Africa; it already exists. I'm just basically world building and taking. So to give an example, I say that my dragons come from dinosaurs who live in the Drakensberg. And if we look at it, yes, dragons did dinosaurs did live in the Drakensberg. And how they became dragons, that's where I then start going towards the fantasy. So I always start off with reality, and I always end up with fantasy. That so my I'm not making the entire thing up completely.
Okay.
I do um, create an alternate version of South Africa as well. I haven't done a just out of nowhere brand new other world. Um, with the Royals, it is set in a city called Mountain Peak. Mountain Peak is supposed to be Durban. Mountain Peak is supposed to be Durban. Golden Crown is Johannesburg. And as you can, I don't know, Golden Crown because City of Gold, basically.
Okay.
And Mountain Peak was mostly because I wanted a peak of a mountain overlooking a city where the peak of the mountain is his sacred place to be, that is being Skhosana King, right? So that's the only, yeah, it's set in South Africa, but an alternate version of South Africa.
Yeah, understandable. Uh, which authors or books influenced your writing journey?
Um, in my case, I think it's difficult because um, in Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter, even Harry Potter's, I mean, it's set in London, I guess, but like an alternate version where you go through Diagon Alley and you end up in the magical world, and but all of these worlds, I wouldn't say I love the books, but I wouldn't say I was inspired by them, although the level of fantasy they go into inspired me. So the depth of fantasy rather than them inspiring me to be a fantasy writer. If anything, it's the comic books when I was a child that inspired me. You know, the characters that were created and the environments they were in. Superman, Batman, the DC Marvel conflict. Yeah, I'm a huge Marvel fan as well. So I think all of
Same.
these things are probably what more led me to enjoying or how I write fantasy rather than what we know to be, the main. Recently, I went through all eight seasons of Game of Thrones. Loved it completely. I hated it the
Same.
first time. I don't know why, but I took away so much from it actually in terms of how they did their world building that I will then start to use that into in my next book. But no, I don't think anything traditional. If anything, I actually enjoy historical fiction, which can often feel like fantasy. So, to give you an example, this one author writes about Genghis Khan, and all of it is there's all the facts are there. It's all Genghis Khan, and he has to build the dialogue in, and obviously what does he say to his wife or to his concubine or so it was more about just that kind of thing where it's so overwhelming it almost feels like a fantasy. So if anything, historical fiction probably was more inspiring for me to write fantasy than other people's fantasy at this point.
Lovely.
Game of Thrones. That's who inspired me.
We all love Game of
I,
Thrones.
I love
And
Game of Thrones. I absolutely loved George R. R. Martin. J. I think I that's one of my favorite authors. Um, I haven't watched Lord of the Rings, and I've been wanting to start Lord of the Rings, as well as Harry Potter. I know that I'm going to love those. I just need a weekend, closed, close house, close curtains, switch off my phone, and
Yeah,
just focus. Um, yeah, Game of Thrones for me is where I got my inspiration. It wasn't from the books, it was from the show itself. Um, in books, I haven't exactly read fantasy. I read mostly romance. There is a book that I'm currently reading though, The Rebel Prince, but it's not a fantasy story. It's also just based on maybe historical fiction, but in the sense of another world. I'm not sure what the genre of that book is, but it's really, really interesting.
lovely. And when Anoshi says she didn't like Game of Thrones the first time, I understand you because I was confused the whole of season one. Like I
that's
didn't
it.
get it. I was so confused. I don't know. It starts off slow, but when it
Hmm.
picks up,
Hmm.
you actually be like, oh wow, this is nice. And I feel like many people couldn't go through season one. That's why they don't like
Absolutely.
it.
Yeah,
Season
so
one.
the first episode put me off completely. Everybody was dead, and I was like, I'm not interested in this. But what was funny is I was trying to read through Lord of the Rings. There's three books. I mean, he wrote one book. They broke it out into three, and I
Mm,
was really having a tough time with the English because it's obviously old English. But after I
mm.
watched all eight seasons of, it made it much easier to read Lord of the Rings. So I suggest you do that, Tina. Go watch Game of Thrones first, just to get the English, the old English, in your brain, and then it's easier to
Yeah.
read Lord of the Rings.
I actually really, really enjoy Old English. The current story that I'm writing, I switch into Old English because there's a character in there who's an ancient royal. So
Ah,
it's my thing. It's right on my track.
Lovely.
then you'll enjoy Lord of the Rings a lot.
So how do you respond when readers interpret your story differently from what you intended?
I can tell immediately that um s- I think I mentioned this earlier, like the people that enjoy it and get it, they find all of the Easter eggs in there, the
Hmm.
references that I make to things that are really South African. The people that don't like it, typically they're looking for a story like um Fourth Wing, or just like that kind of, so it's either the dark romance, or they're looking for just a what is the other kind of romance? Um, Standard, like your run of the mill. It's happening in a totally different universe. Nothing local. It's, so I find that if you like the South African vibe, you enjoy it. And I'm ready for it. So yeah, there's nothing I can do about it. If they interpret it differently to how I intended it, it's because in their mind they're reading it with a fourth wing mindset, a romantasy mindset, and that's what they love. They love romantasy, and now they're reading this young adult book set right here, and all the references are lost. So the sand people don't mean, they're not close to the meaning of the sand people. The Drakensberg doesn't mean anything, and Zalo Yelanga might be meaningless to people. It's only I find people who know these places that tend to get super excited about it. So I think that's my job. My job is to show people all the magic in South Africa, and be patient as they start to read it. It's like I feel they're going to read my book the first time, and it's my experience of watching Game of Thrones, which was, this is not awesome. But then when I went back again, I was like, wow, this is a 5 star. Like, why did I dislike it so much to begin with? So I do think my book, you probably will read it now, and if you didn't get it, you're gonna probably read it in a few years' time, and it's gonna be like, wow, like, So I do think we're gonna get there.
I hear you.
I also do feel as though maybe every experience and okay, I don't know how to phrase this. I feel as if you put this up here and someone will have a different interpretation or perspective of what they're seeing. And I love that each person who does get to read any story really, they have a different idea of the world that they're seeing, the character that they're seeing. That's why a lot of the times you'd find that if you post a picture of a character that you had in created, the reader would be like, "No, he's not supposed to look like that." But when you're describing, this is what I was describing, but their perspective of it is not the same. And you can't really help that. And especially when it comes to fantasy, they're just not going to see it the way that you intended. And very rarely they do. But the nice thing about it is how you can bond over the differences and you can talk about it even as a community and open a space with the readers where they can discuss or even ask the questions that confused them or things that they missed about whatever it is that they were reading.
And just to add, I think I wanted to, because I'd done something new about Tolkien's books, is he'd written it in a specific way. He'd also created, although he used Old English, he also created aspects of English and created words, new words, which he created by himself. And back then, as you can imagine, there wasn't the internet, or like,
Oh,
okay,
yeah.
that was intended to be a capital letter. So publishers were then correcting his his book because they thought it made mistakes, but he deliberately had capitalized certain words or created a new word out of, just to have a different way of expressing it. So I do think that even now it's still happening to him, because when I'm reading it, it's also like Americanized English, as opposed to, he's British, so obviously he would have written in UK English as
Yeah,
well.
yeah,
So I do think it still happens. It's unavoidable, and it's
yes.
again one of those things you just have to accept. And like I like Tina's approach, which is, everyone has a different perspective, and that's what makes it exciting. You come together and you all say, "Oh, I thought this was happening. No, no, I thought that was happening," and that's where I feel like the real conversation happens.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's always fun when you meet up a group of of readers, and they tell you how they experienced the book. And we experience things differently. That's when you get to see other people's views and be like, oh, so I can actually see it from that person's point of view. And it's always mind-blowing, like how much people take away from a book. We can read the same book but experience
Yep,
it differently.
Differently.
And it's
absolutely.
always, yeah.
especially in fantasy, I find.
Yeah.
Mm.
Mhm.
If you would give advice to an aspiring fantasy author, what would it be?
This is the thing. You have to set aside your expectation of what of, you have to write for yourself. The minute you start writing for your audience is when you then go all over the place.
You
In
lose yourself.
romance, I mean, I know some romance authors personally.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, the perspective there is they write with a very specific tropes in mind and specific hashtags and a specific plot structure. So romance has a very it moves in a certain way that we're expecting. You have to have the here. I learned a new acronym, the happily ever after, and it's not a romance if you don't have a here at the end. And when you're writing fantasy, it's not like that at all. Like, you have to be comfortable with the world you build, and hopefully you can connect with people who feel the same way as you do. So in I think you
Mm.
can make far more people happy who love romance, that read romance, but you're going to have niche audiences when you writing fantasy. And yeah, I think that's what you have to accept.
And you have to be very confident in your world that you have built. You have to be so confident in it. Do not be afraid. Fantasy is exploring. Just
Mm.
explore. Just don't be afraid. You already have a person that turns into a wolf, for example. So that there is the sky that turns green and blue and purple at times. It's fitting. You understand?
Mm.
Do not hold yourself back. Go as far as you hope to go. Go as far as you can go. I think that's what makes fantasy a lot more interesting. It's that there are no limits. You can't say, oh, you can't do that, or you can't, you can fly in a fantasy book. You can just grow wings. I mean, well, within reason, but you can explore just about anything. So
Mm.
do not be afraid. Do not hold yourself back. Do not put yourself in a box. As long as you have your storyline and you are sure of your plot and where you're going with your story, go out.
I would say the only rule might be, it's not a rule really, but did you adequately suspend reality for the reader?
Yeah.
Because you're taking them to another world. They literally want to leave this world and go lose themselves in another world. If you
Mm.
didn't adequately suspend reality, which is where my book is a bit difficult because we're in South Africa. It's hard to suspend reality if you're in South Africa, and I'm forcing you into a fantasy world in South Africa. So I think that does make it a bit more difficult for myself. So I made my job more difficult. But I
Mhm.
agree with Tina. I think you can say, "Oh, I just turned from orange to blue, and that means I'm in a different mood." If you've built it up
If you built
adequately
it,
and you
yeah.
and they suspend reality, they completely believe you, then you've done a great job.
As for completely believe you, they will fight with you. There's no one who can turn green. um, if magic existed, what's the first spell you would cast?
I mean, now I'm gonna go be esoteric and say world peace, no hunger. All kids should be educated. I'm so passionate about this.
Mm.
Um, South Africa would be seen for its beauty. I would just change people's perspective. I would do a lot of things. Yeah. Is that magic? Is that black magic? I don't know.
I don't know. But wouldn't you think of yourself first? You'd be like, okay, let me do this. Let me change this in my life first or something.
Yeah, you know what? I have a life I'm grateful for, and when I am one of those people who look outside myself. I wrote the book for kids. I want them to feel empowered. So it wasn't about me. Yes, at first it was about my daughter, but this
Mhm.
message for my daughter could be given to all the kids in South Africa. It takes a village to raise a child, and I want to be in that village raising the child. So my thought about it is not as long as I have a roof over my head, clothes on my back, I've got food on the table, I'm doing better than 80% of South Africa. So if I could change things, it would be to have a better South Africa.
That's really inspiring. I said on my personal Facebook that if I were to be a millionaire, I'd probably build like women cities, like women only cities where only women reside in. I think that would probably be my magic trick, my dark magic trick. I would
Mm-hmm.
love to do that. But for myself, I think I want to have a concealment power. Like I want to be able to just be invisible sometimes and just disappear, Jay. That's it.
I feel you. Which fantasy cliche do you secretly love and will never give up?
Which fantasy cliche do I love and will never give up? Like, I'm trying to think of one. Does anything come to you, Tina?
Not yet.
uh,
Hmm.
in the end, the good guy wins in the end, and the bad guy is vanquished. Because in my books, it's all about the main overarching theme is good and evil. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's so many cliches.
You can go
I don't
first,
have
Tina.
one. I don't have one in particular.
I think I don't know cliches in fantasy actually. I'm trying to think of one. I
Oh, there's
can't.
plenty. So, for example, like the cliche of the wise old uh, grandmother,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
or the secretly talented wizard, or the person who the trope of the chosen one. So those
I
are
love
the
that one.
tropes, but they're cliches. Let's be honest.
I think
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
The chosen one. The chosen one is my thing. Never let it go.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I love chosen one too. That's what the books are. Those are tropes in the book as well.
Okay. Before we open questions, please books, their titles, how to get them, where to get them. And yeah, please follow Anoshi and Tina King for more bookish content and to get to know more about their books.
Okay, so my book Juluwan is available. So Juluwan was traditionally published. I got very fortunate. It was my first book, and I only submitted it to one publisher, and the one publisher published it. So the Juluwan's available from cresthouse.co.za. It's available at some exclusive bookstores, bargain bookstores, Wordsworth, and it's available on my website, anoshizaretzki.com. Also on my website, because the second book I just decided my day job is marketing. I do a lot of writing at work and a lot of designing, and I can try and put a book together. So I decided to try and go indie for the second one. So the second one's available from me only. And if you go to my website, there's a shop section because I'm also doing book boxes, and I do merch like dragon hatchling merch, or just what do you call these things? I make these up myself with dragonstone and lava and that kind of thing. So there's some dragon merch in there which you'll find on anoshizaretzki.com. I will be at, like I mentioned, Comic Con from the 28th to the 31st. I am speaking on the 31st at 3 p.m., which is the Sunday. So there's plenty. I hope everyone watching will be going through to Comic Con and hope to see you there.
I hope I can get tickets because I was looking at the website earlier and it says something about being sold out for phase two.
Yes, so then it's still a phase 3.
Oh, okay, I'll check that out. So I have only digitally published. I am on Visionary Writings. I'm also on Wattpad. My name on Wattpad is Tina King
Mhm.
MX, and on Visionary it's Tina King. You can also get my books from me directly. You can DM me on Facebook or here on TikTok. I'll give you my number. I have a list of PDFs just off the top of my head. The Royals two books, book one and book two. I have The Big Mountain, A Love Like This, Dealing with My Demons, Yours Truly, and then I have short books called Nibbles. These are 10 chapters, 15 chapter type books, and they go for about 20 rands or 30 rands. So if you're trying to, I don't know, try me out, you can start off small, and yeah.
Lovely. Okay, I hope you guys had a lovely time with our amazing authors. If you have any questions for them, please send them through. So who would play your villain in a movie adaptation if your book was ever adapted to a movie?
You know, that lady that played Cruella de Vil, probably her.
I love her. I love her.
Uh, I don't know. I think I would like, I don't know if you know Nelisiwe Smiya here in South Africa. I
Yeah, I
love
know
her
her.
as an actress. Oh, I love her so much. I wish she could play a character, any character actually, in one of my books.
Okay, so Delight is asking what rules of writing fantasy are difficult to play by?
There aren't rules per se on fantasy, just because of the fact that you have to suspend reality and go outside the norm. So you literally have to make up everything. I think the main rule, like I was saying earlier, is you have to do a good enough job of suspending reality for the reader. Do they enter into your fantasy world and leave behind reality and just completely get absorbed by what you're doing? That would
Mhm.
be the main one. But I have to say, I mean, there are plot structures that you do have to follow, and sometimes it's difficult. I think the most difficult thing is because you do so much of what we call exposition. When you write fantasy, you have to do a lot of explaining on your world building. That takes up a lot of word count. So if you're trying to write a 70,000 word book, it's really difficult. I had one reader say there wasn't enough. But if I had put in everything, so initially it was 90,000 words and I had brought it down to 70. My second book is 100,000 words because there was just no way. So I do think those are the difficulties. I mean, fantasy rules come from publishers who will say 80 to 100,000 words for a fantasy novel. We won't accept more than that. So those kinds of
Mhm.
things are difficult to stick by because trying to balance giving enough information in the world building without, like Tina said, without boring them to death with all your details, is things that you have to be mindful of. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I agree with that. You need to just be mindful of what you're where you're going with your storyline. I think that's the most important part, really. Mm.
Lovely. What's the weirdest Google search you've done for research?
Oh my gosh. What does basalt feel like? Basalt is the volcanic rock at the top of the Drakensberg. Um, what? Oh, this is my weird one. What? Because obviously I know nothing about battles, and I had to write these battles in forts and castles. So what is it called when there's a whole bunch of arrows flying through the air? What is that called? And what is it called when you put your arrow into the bow? I did not know any of that. So those are the weird things, and probably, yeah, I'm listed on the FBI for violent behavior research because I had to figure out, and what does it feel like when somebody gets stabbed? Now, I did
Yeah.
ask this to ChatGPT, and ChatGPT says I'm in violation of of the. So
Because you
we
want to
can't.
know.
Those are the important things. We want to know what happens when you stab someone, when they're hit with an arrow, when you have a sword through
Yeah.
them. And no, ChatGPT would not give me an answer, and so I had to make that up. So those are some of the weird things. Yep,
They will call the police on you. They'll be like, check on this one.
exactly.
For me, I asked, how does it feel to impale someone and not let them die immediately? And I don't know. I think my laptop froze or something. Something just happened, Jay. And fortunately, I was redirected to a medical or something page. But ChatGPT constantly says violation
Yeah.
of whatever, whatever, and I can't generate this information or something along those lines. I don't know, but yeah, being impaled and not, which is like being stabbed also. So
Yes.
yeah.
The computer thinks you want to commit some things.
Yeah. Yeah.
They don't know that we're doing research.
It does not. It does not. So there's keywords it will not allow you to do. And then as a fantasy author, you're sitting going, okay, let me try and make this up because nobody alive knows what it's like to be stabbed to death. So maybe it'll work.
Let me just imagine how it's going to be like and try to use my
Yeah.
imagination. Um, how do you make sure your reader follows the storyline without holding their hand throughout?
The storyline for me can't be too convoluted. There can't be too many subplots. When I'm reading Lord of the Rings, there's a ridiculous amount of cast members and there's a loads of subplots. And as much as I love the movies, reading the book was really hard to get through because of that. So
Mhm.
if you have crystal clear 3 or 4 subplots and your cast is not too inflated, I think that, and your language, I mean, like I said, on top of trying to get through the inflated cast and the language that Tolkien is using, which is thrown into the mix. So if you want people to be able to focus on what you're saying and follow it right through from beginning to end, it can't be too complicated. We want complexity, we want richness, but we shouldn't add richness. We should rather add richness by the quality of the story we're writing rather than the inflated cast and the inflated amount of subplots in my mind.
Mhm.
I usually start with one main plot, and I do this with one character, and for the next couple of chapters, the first, let's say, 10 chapters, I add just bit by bit other characters that are going to be part of this main character's plot. Then only I break off into different POVs after that, and yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. How do you balance myth, folklore, and modern storytelling in your books?
So it depends. For me, it depends on where I am. So in the second book, called Lumina, and I'm gonna go back to Inzalo Yelanga, where there's Inzalo Yelanga is on the 31-degree line of longitude, east, and on the same line is the Great Zimbabwe ruins and the pyramids of Egypt. So it's considered quite. It's called the Golden Meridian. So there is some folklore. We don't know if that's 100% true or not. So, it does fall under a bit of folklore. The mythology comes in when we start talking about the Anunnaki that were in South Africa. Then we're like, okay, now how much of this do we absorb into this, etc. So it's about what's happening in the story. And the advice is, if it doesn't move the story forward, don't write it in. So in my case, the mythology was the Golden Meridian, and the at this place in Zaloyalanga is the oldest stone calendar in the world, older than Stonehenge, 75,000 years old. How much of that, how old it is, etc. I mean, it's great for a fantasy author. We can embellish and make up the rest. And then in terms of now coming back to modern fantasy, then I'm using the space as going to portal fantasy. So there's a portal that opens and they go from Inzalo Yelanga back to another place that they were, which was in the mountains in Drakensberg by a portal. So it depends on what's happening, but it has to move the story forward in order for you to decide what is the balance that of each of the mythology, etc., that you're going to use.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Also, blending in um, realism and real life to your fantasy and the magic actually it tends to hold a lot more structure. What I do, I just noticed that I also like to write about things that are currently happening in terms of um, political unrest situations, but not the exact thing that happens, but something that is similar and something that can hold ground. This way, it can connect the reader from, hey, this is something that happens in real life, and also taking them out of the real life situation into a fantasy um, place where if it were to be solved, how would it be solved? But in magic. Yeah, well,
Mhm. Does African history, pre-colonial, colonial, and post, influence your writing for relatability?
In the weekend, I was presenting at the Science Fiction and Fantasy of South Africa, the organization. And it was something, that came up from one of the people that a lot of people write a lot of South Africans write fantasy, but they write it in a way that it feels like it could be set anywhere in the world. I deliberately use South African places, South African history, South African people, South African mythology. It's very, very South African in as many ways as I could. Like I said, my magical folk are basically the Sand people, and the Drakensberg really exists, and I created it from up there. I drew from our own dragon. So I had to go and find out about the history of the 4.5 billion years of the Earth, South Africa's creation, the Drakensberg's 180 million years of existence, dinosaur, etc., etc. But they're all related to South Africa. Now, in terms of going pre-colonial, well, I don't get into the fact that the San are a marginalized group of people pushed out of their homelands into a more northern territory. I don't get into that because I'm not referring to the sand directly. I'm creating another group of people, a magical people, based on them. So I don't get into the political aspects of it, if that's what the question was asking. But I'm as South African as you can get. I find about as many South African things and places and nuances, mythology, history as I can, and I infuse the book with it.
Lovely.
yes, on my side as well, it does influence my writing. The Big Mountain, for example, is quick rundown a story about this lady who is a healer with her own magical powers coming out of her hands and being able to heal. She is in an isolated village, and the way I structured it and her adaptability into modern time, and also connecting to someone who has absolutely no idea about the environment that she grew up in. And
Mhm.
it did take a lot of African history, and I think actually did type of tap into the pre and the post colonial situation, because the whole reason why she had to leave the village is because of a situation that was something that you could relate to in modern time and actual history of South Africa, really. I don't want to give
Okay.
too much of the story in case someone wants to read it and sees a spoiler alert.
No
So,
problem. No
yeah.
problem. How do you write? Sorry. How do you write death in an impactful way since it's common in fantasy genre?
Yes, I was relying on our friend ChatGPT to help me understand what it feels like. But I had to then go and reference another book. So what I did was, like I mentioned, I was very influenced by Connie Golden, that is his name, the author, who wrote then a quintology. He wrote 5 books on Genghis Khan. And I basically had to base how I wrote battles and death, etc., based on what I learned from reading his 5 books, because I wasn't getting any answers any other way. And you can't just go walk up to someone who's not in the army, or not whose job is not a policeman, to go and ask them, what is this like? What do you look out for? So Genghis Khan was quite organized in the way he built his army. I mean, he basically took over most of Asia and into Western Europe back in his time. So he knew what he was doing, and I took a lot of it from the armor they used to the weapons to their how they form their their little units, etc., to the bigger army. So all of that, the weapons and how people die, etc., all pretty much were influenced by those set of books.
Alright.
I only started, not started, but I wrote about Impactful Death with the Royals 2, book 2, and I think what made it a lot more impactful was the connection the characters build with one another, and it it it, it taught me. I can't even lie. It was very difficult to write because of that connection, because of how attached I was to the characters, even though it was fantasy, because their deaths also were not they were not magic, as in caused by magic or their power. It Some of them were just regular deaths, you know. One was taken by an illness, the other tried to commit suicide, and it felt more real because it wasn't connected to their magic, if that answers the question.
Okay. How do you feel about the use of AI in creative spaces?
In my case, it's an important question because I'm a marketer, and I have my reputation as a marketer to uphold as well. So it's like saying, how do I feel about using Excel to do mathematical calculations or financial calculations? At some point, Excel was like, nope, we are still going to use our fingers to count. But when Excel came along, it was like, okay, we have to get used to this new thing. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? So that's kind of where it is. South Africans are slow adopters. This is from my marketing perspective. So South Africans typically are quite conservative compared to the rest of the world, and we are slow adopters, which means we are going to be in a space of discomfort, of accusing everyone of being unethical for the use of AI. Now, as a marketer, if I'm writing articles for work, I would definitely not be using AI. In the same way, when I'm writing my book, I would not be. So anyway, when I wrote my first book, there was no AI end to end, no AI at all. But I wouldn't use AI because I'm the person to go copy paragraphs from Kindle and go look at the AI checker to check is this written by AI. So if I'm doing it, I'm definitely not going to be using AI in work that reflects my credibility or impacts my credibility. The only time I did allow AI to, because I was the head of marketing where I was, is if for the internal publication, for the newsletter that we do in-house, if people who are like the production manager whose job is not really writing and they needed to use AI for that, I would say, fine, go ahead and use AI for that. I'm not going to hold it against you because this is an internal paper. So I think that is the difference. Right now, South Africa is not ready for South African readers. Will definitely hold it against you if you are going to be using AI to write your books. And I have to agree, because the whole creative process of writing is that you enjoy, right? Writing, that's the enjoyment part of it. And
Yeah.
when you say you're a writer, because when you ask AI to do your writing, you're saying you're just giving a concept to AI. All you did was give a concept. You didn't write the book, and you called a writer for a reason that you write the book. So I'm pretty strict about saying I use AI to check how to kill someone. It's important because I don't know, or how to use a sword, or what is the sound that, for example, arrow makes as it goes through the air. I don't know those things. That's what I use it for. But to write a book, then I might as well not write the book, because what's the point?
Mm.
Yes, I agree. And also, I think it takes out the enjoyment, really. If you're going to ask AI to write whatever, I want to say passage or whatever, it takes out the essence of what you as the human would have expressed in that story. Um, I do feel as though AI has its corrective uses somewhere, but not in actual writing, not in developing your plot. Um, it could be used to help you with grammar, sure, but even then, you cannot fully rely on it. You have to, this is how you learn, even as a person. You have to teach yourself how to identify your grammar, how to use punctuation properly.
Mm.
So, as much as it's there as a helper, you cannot fully rely on it. I'm not totally against because I'm in tech and I did my analytics certificate, we were being taught ethical uses of AI. And in the ethical uses of AI, you are not expected to, um, how can I put it, to fully give over, to fully hand your entire task to the AI. AI
Mm.
is there to, as a tool, basically, to help you to um, not even hold your hand, actually, just to point to you that look in this area, go find your answer in this area. Don't take from me, go there. And yeah, I think I'm not too, it's just that you can see when something is AI, you can just
Mm.
tell from
Yes.
just scanning it that
It's the purple prose. It's that ornate
yes,
language that tells you, and
yeah,
immediately, okay, that's no, we don't talk like that out here in South
Yeah.
Africa.
It doesn't make sense half of the
it
time.
doesn't. Ah,
Mm.
but I'm not
Um,
mad at it for I'm on the fence, really. I
Mm.
went into a deep dive with it with my course, but it's just something that I do not feel comfortable with it. I
mm.
feel as though it will be taking away too much of the human aspect. I get so irate when I have to do um, I don't know, talk to someone or make an appointment, and the website gives me a chatbot. And I'm like, but I want to talk to a human. I want to interact with a human, please.
Yeah,
And yeah, but I'm not, to each their own. I just don't feel that it is supposed to be in the creative space.
yeah, I understand you. Do you Africanize your characters perhaps by giving them African names or making them speak local language?
Absolutely. I'm gonna, okay, I studied Zulu when I was in university a little bit. Ngiyakhuluma isiZulu kancane. Okay, so I start there with the Zulu, isiZulu. I did use four African languages predominantly, which is Zulu, Igbo, which is obviously not a South African language, Sudanese, and Tsonga. And I did try to use Shona as well, but for some reason, the way Shona is written is very similar to Japanese. And I found that I was trying to use words, so I created an 800 word language. That's my starting point, predominantly using African languages. So my magical folks speak their own language called Julawesi. And so it is it is a combination of those four predominantly, although there are other South African languages sort of sprinkled out in there. Two Hindi languages, which is Sanskrit and Hindi, Arabic as well. And those then I just sort of mix in there. It depends on what I'm talking about, etc. But the actual language itself is heavily anchored on the four African languages. And the names of the Julawasi, the magical tribes, are all so I went for a structure of three letter names. So you've got San, you've got Neo, you got Gao, etc. And those are names ranging from any African country. So I didn't choose South Africa in particular. But yes, all those names are based on three-letter African names that I could then just find. So the magical culture of the San is preserved in that way. The reason I went with that is because when you hear the San speaking, it's clicks and very quick words. So I wanted the names to be short. That kind of just says that's a language. So even though it's San as a name of a person, the full name is Sanellen, but they're all known by their short three-letter, three alphabet names. So absolutely, I did include quite a lot of research into creating my 800-word language for the tribe.
Lovely.
Yes, I do Africanize my characters. All of my characters are they have South African or African names. I'm trying to explore different languages in South Africa. So the Big Mountain Story is half Tsonga, half Zulu. So a lot of the language is Tsonga or Zulu, but mostly Tsonga. And in the Royals, it was isiZulu, and currently it is also isiZulu. But I want to explore more of South African languages because in my fantasy stories, I want it to be African based. I needed to have the grounding of this is African spirituality, magic, and everything surrounding just African people.
Lovely. So I'm going to mix those two questions together. The first question is from Dumi. She's saying, so AI can replace editors? That's a question. And the second one is from Delight. Does your research include consulting elders or cultural custodians of the tribes you anchor for your stories?
AI for editing. So the problem with AI is that it uses it as a base. The problem with AI and why everyone is saying it's unethical is because it takes everyone else's books and puts it in there and then makes suggestions. Can it edit? It can edit in American English. It can edit in an Americanized way. But both Tina and myself are writing in a South African context with a South African voice and a South African culture, South African, and it rejects a lot of stuff. It like reworks stuff.
Yeah.
I try to use it. It's so irritating because in South Africa we say things a certain way. We call each other auntie and uncle if they're older than us. No matter what race group you are, language you speak, you will speak to your elders by calling them auntie and uncle. For example, my UK editor kept scratching that out, going, "It sounds childish to say auntie." No, dude. In South Africa, that's how you will get a clap on your head, even if you are 50 years old. If you call your elder, you by their first name. So there's cultural nuances it doesn't get, and especially when you are writing. If you are writing as a South African about a world that exists out there somewhere, but if you're writing in South Africa, no, I don't think editing using AI will help you with grammar because it's not a South African grammar. It's obviously Americanized. Even if you say use South African English, no, it's not going to do. It's not. You're not going to. It's still going to go revert back to using the Americanized way of doing it, and its way of expressing itself. You can see the cultural context of South Africa. It's never going to get it. So if you're writing a South African book, an African book, No, AI is not going to be helping you edit it.
True.
I absolutely agree, and I have no add-ons. Exactly that. When it comes to AI replacing editors, I don't think it's possible. It can try, but it's going to take way too long of training. It'll probably take years to train AI to be able to reach the certain level of finding the richness in our storytelling as African people. It can't, unfortunately.
Yeah. And going on to the second question about did we consult elders, etc. It's very difficult. I've not met one single San person, so and I really want to. I really would love to meet this group of South Africans that are out there that I'm really rooting for in life. But I haven't been able to. I've had to rely on a lot of books and resources. So the people I did speak to was I went out to Clarence and did a tour with he's a hydrologist, a geohydrologist, a paleontologist, Dr. Gideon Groenewald, and he basically knows the area well. He knows the dinosaurs. So the whole history of South Africa from that paleontological historical perspective, yes. And then definitely when I went to Inzalo Yalanga, I did it with a proper tour guide who knows the area, who knows the culture, because we went on spring equinox, like I said last year, which is a very spiritual time at Inzalo Yelanga. And so you can't just, like, it's flooded with people. They're there to pray, they're there to do their cultural rituals, etc. And watching that and having it explained was my only opportunity to then better understand what the culture of the past was like and why the present people were there doing the prayer. They didn't explain the prayers. It was too private, and I respected that. So I'm not going to ask you like, what's your prayer about? If it's private to
Yeah.
you, why are you doing this? That's rude. So I didn't. But that was definitely the tour guide himself was Zimbabwean, and he seems to have been some kind of expert on this golden meridian and the area of Inzalo Yalanga and why there's so much spiritual significance to it. So yes, that was the only other person I consulted.
Lovely.
I am very shy in general, so asking someone, I am always a bit hesitant, but I do love to observe. I observe from my grandmother's teachings, from her traditions and the way that she does things. And from there, I ask questions. Hey, why do you do something this way and that way? And I anchor a lot of my stories with her teachings, with her traditions, with her experiences also.
Mm-hmm.
With having to write different languages, for example, exploring the Tsonga, I had to I had to go and ask people because I am not Tsonga. I do not know anyone that is Tsonga. So I opened um I think it was on Facebook somewhere. I asked, guys, um, does anyone know Tsonga, right? And from there,
Mm-hmm.
I asked, um, is it correct if I say it in this manner, in this way, or would you do something like this, or how do you greet a person, an elder, a chief of a village, not just an elder, a chief, a leader, and what are the cultural things that you need to do in order to do this, and that. Because there's a lot of rituals that were performed in the story as well. So I needed to be able to speak in their clan names and translate the things that they are doing. So I had to ask someone. And also with the Zulu culture, there is a there's just a lot of things that I wouldn't know because I'm Xhosa. And one of those things were the reed dance and what happens in the reed dance. I had to sit down and consult with someone, but they weren't an elder though they were a young woman who has experienced it. So I asked her, I said, girl, sit down with me. And to an extent of comfort, because I do understand that with culture, you can't truly say certain things to someone who is on the outside of. So she then explained the process that way, and that way I was able to relate it to the story. So yeah, we have to do a bit of consulting.
Lovely. It was so lovely getting to know about fantasy. Unfortunately, our time is over. We are supposed to wrap up at 9:30. Thank you so much, Anoshi and Tina. Thank you for taking your time to join us here. And it was lovely getting to know about fantasy. It's something that I would love to tap into in the future, but hey, I'm lazy. I don't think I can the whole build up and I don't know. But yeah, I would really love to try it again. I have written one fantasy book, but yeah, I would really love to try it again. Thank you so much for your time. We had a lovely time with you too.
Thank
Thank
you
you
for
for
having
having me.
us. It was really great being here. And thank you for all the questions to everyone that asked. Thank you for your participation. And we really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, guys. I had a wonderful session with you two ladies, and I would definitely love to read, Catherine, when you come with your fantasy book. I enjoyed Imprinted.
Yeah, it's
Loved, loved,
imprinted.
loved that book. It was so, you were close to going into fantasy and you captured it so well. I'm absolutely going to read this lady's books. I am so interested in hearing everything about the Sand People, and
Mm-hmm.
the way you're describing the how you incorporate the Drakensberg, and I've always been interested in going to visit the Drakensberg. So the way you incorporate magic around that area, I feel like it would. Oh, I'm just tingling just thinking about it. So I will
Thank
be
you.
contacting you to read your book.
Thank you so much.
Okay, ladies, enjoy the rest of your night. I'll communicate. Now I'm glitching. I'll communicate with you two on WhatsApp. Thank you so much for your time. Enjoy the rest of your
You have
evening.
a good
Bye.
evening.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Okay, everybody, thank you. Enjoy the rest of your evening. See you Friday. Bye.